Welcome to the Policy Advocacy 101 for AAC users webinar. My name is Tana Szymanski, and I am the Executive Director and Legal Director of Communication First. I'm a white woman in her 50s with short brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and I have a wonky left eye. There's a screen behind me in the Communication First green color with our logo on it. My pronouns are she and her. If you're new to the organization, Communication First is the only organization led by and for and dedicated to protecting and advancing the rights and interests of what we estimate to be at least 5 million people in the United States who cannot rely on speech alone to be heard and understood. We are a cross-disability organization focused on civil rights and policy change, and we're thrilled to be hosting this webinar with some amazing policy advocates in our community. We encourage you to visit our website at communicationfirst.org, where you can explore our many resources, sign up for our newsletter, and link to our social media accounts. A quick note on some accessibility features for today's webinar. We have American Sign Language interpretation, as well as live real-time captioning. You can turn on the captioning at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the CC icon. To view the captions in a separate window, click on the stream text link in the chat. Ren, I'm going to ask you to insert the link periodically as people join. We have a packed program today, so may not be able to take questions from the audience, but if you do have a question, please write it in the Q&A box. If you would like to ask a question in American Sign Language, feel free to let us know that in the chat, and we can put you on screen to ask your question. Otherwise, we ask you to avoid using the chat box unless you have a technical or access issue or request, in which case, please direct that to the hosts and we will assist you. This will minimize distractions for our presenters and attendees. The recording of this webinar will be available once we've had time to produce a corrected transcript and a video with open captions. Everything will be posted on our website, and we will send a notice to those who registered when that is ready. Before I introduce our panelists today, I want to note a few things. First, this webinar will be policy neutral, which means that we won't be discussing how to advocate for specific policies or on specific policy issues. The point of this webinar is to share strategies, tactics, skills, techniques, tools, and actions that anyone can use to try to change something about the world around them. The panelists may use examples where they were advocating on a specific policy issue, but we won't be going into the specifics of any one issue. Second, today's webinar will be focused on the policy and political systems in the United States, not those of any other country. Third, the skills we discuss will be also helpful for advocating for policy change at any level, whether that's in your local community, your school district, your county, your state, or at the national level. And finally, please note that some of our panelists may mention specific policymakers or people who are running for or have run for public office. As a 501c3 organization, Communication First does not campaign for or endorse any candidates for political office, and we have discouraged our panelists from doing this today. To the extent anyone says anything that looks like it is endorsing a candidate for public office, please know that that is the view of the person speaking only and not the position of Communication First. So what are the goals of today's webinar? We created this webinar to complement the policy advocacy toolkit that Communication First released in April. So we'll be walking through and expanding on some of the key policy advocacy skills and steps that we've laid out in that toolkit. And our panelists will chime in throughout with stories and tips they have learned from their own advocacy experiences. Here's what you will learn by the end of today's webinar. First, what are your responsibilities and rights to advocate on policy issues? Second, we'll talk about how to tell your story in a way that will help you push for policy change. We'll try to help you how to find out who your elected representatives are at the local, state, and federal or national level, and what their responsibilities are to you as a citizen or a constituent or someone who lives in their district. We'll share information about how to get information about policy issues that are important to you and that impact you. We will talk about how to contact your elected representatives. We will talk about how to find coalitions or advocacy groups to join. And at the end of today's webinar, we're going to encourage all attendees to use the skills they will learn today by taking at least one action and putting it into practice. You can either email one of your elected representatives to tell your story and ask them to do something. You can post a message on social media if you're on social media about a policy issue you care about, and tag us. We'll mention that again at the end. So now I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists. Bob Williams is the co-founder of Communication First. After serving as the organization's first policy director for 5 years, he's now in a more part-time senior advisor role. Bob has been an advocate for policy change since high school, when he staged a walkout of his segregated classroom to demand more inclusive education. Since then, Bob has advocated for policy change for people with significant disabilities in different roles in federal and state government and in the nonprofit sector over 5 decades. Before starting Communication First in 2019, he was director of the U.S. Independent Living Administration at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Jordyn Zimmerman has advocated for change at her local school, across communities, on Capitol Hill, and at the White House. Her story about being denied and gaining access to communication as a young adult is featured in the documentary, This Is Not About Me. Jordyn is also the chair of the board of directors of Communication First, and as such, she is my boss. Next, we have Toby Latham, who is an employment and disability rights attorney and a member of Communication First board of directors as well. He lives in Northern Virginia with his family, including his elementary school age son, who uses augmentative and alternative communication. We'll use that term a lot, and we'll abbreviate it as AAC. Toby's also an Army combat veteran. Then we have Angelica Vega, who serves on our advisory council. She lives in New Jersey and currently works at a large banking firm as a data management associate. She earned a degree in philosophy with a minor in public health from American University in Washington, D.C. Dean Strauss is another panelist. He is the communications manager at the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. His background is in media and design with a focus on civic media, queer and disability representation, and digital media. He has a degree in civic media from Columbia College, Chicago. And Samuel Habib is the Emmy award-winning co-director of the New York Times op doc called My Disability Roadmap, and the new feature documentary called The Ride Ahead, which is airing on PBS next month on July 21st. I encourage you to check that out. Both of those films are co-directed by Samuel with his father, Dan Habib. Samuel also helped Dan create the nationally broadcast film, Mr. Connolly Has ALS, about Samuel's principal, who gets ALS and loses the ability to speak. Samuel is a college student and works at Like Right Now Films and the Westchester Institute for Human Development. You will also hear from my 2 colleagues, Merrick Sedgwick and Lauren Proby. Merrick is our program manager, and Lauren is our brand new policy manager. She just started last week. Bren Coloni, our program associate, is helping behind the scenes to ensure everything flows smoothly today. I am now going to turn it over to Merrick, who's going to kick us off by talking about how to develop your personal story to use in your advocacy efforts. Merrick.
Good morning or afternoon. I am a white masculine presenting person with short brown hair and wearing glasses. We are hoping this webinar will inspire you to tell your story to elected representatives. We decided to start off by talking about how to create your story for advocacy. Storytelling is a powerful tool to encourage change. By telling your story, you can make policies personal. You can show people how policies can change your life. Some policies can change something in your life, while not changing anything for other people. Those other people can learn from you. They will better understand what the policy does and does not do. This includes elected representatives. It is important for elected representatives to know how policies impact your life, because it is their job to make policies that support us all. Elected representatives are people who get their jobs when people vote for them. They can represent us at the city, county, district, state, or national level. There are a lot of words for elected representatives. Sometimes they are called policy makers, decision makers, or elected officials. There are many words used for elected representatives. Elected representatives work on government laws and policies. The hope is that they will make decisions that support us. If they make decisions that do not support us, we might not vote for them in the future. That's why it's important for them to learn about us and how policies affect us. People who need and use augmentative and alternative communication tools and supports are left out of a lot of conversations. A lot of people still make decisions about us without asking us what we want first. Elected representatives might not know what people who need and use augmentative and alternative communication tools and supports want or need. We can use storytelling to teach our elected representatives how to best support us. I always recommend that people plan their story in advance. You can write the full story out, make a list of guiding points to discuss, save it in a speech-generating device, make a video recording, or any other way of saving it that works for you. If I will see my representative in person, I like to make a one-page document with the most important points. I print out 2 copies. One for me, so I remember everything I want to say, and one for the elected representative. I also save my exact statements in my text-to-speech app, so all I need to do is find them. The important thing is to know what you want to say before you need to say it. Elected representatives might only have a couple minutes to talk with you. There are a few main things that should go in your story. First, you should introduce yourself. You should say your name, and maybe 1 or 2 things about yourself. Then, tell your representative what you want them to do. Tell them a story about why it's important for them to follow through. Repeat what you want them to do. Thank them for listening. Today you will see a lot of examples of storytelling from our panelists. You will learn about ways to share your story and influence policy. We are developing how-to videos that will show you how to share your story in different ways. If there's anything you want to see as a video, please let us know. When they're done, we will share them on our website. There are also some resources made by some other disability rights organizations. The ARC has a detailed storytelling toolkit. So does Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. We will put the links in the chat. We look forward to seeing you put your stories in action.
Thank you, Merrick. So we're hoping this webinar will inspire you to tell your story, to help make change, and we want to give you the tools to do that. I want to echo the recommendation for the storytelling tools that our friends at the ARC of the United States and the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network created. Those resources are both fantastic, and we see no reason to recreate the wheel, so we're happy to platform them and encourage folks to use them. When you advocate for change, a big part of that work is sharing information and increasing awareness. So, and because people who need and use AAC have been so isolated and invisible historically, there are not very many policymakers who have a good idea about how AAC users are impacted by different policies. That makes it especially important for people in our community who need and use AAC and their allies and supporters to tell their stories and to share this information. You definitely want to share information with people who have the power to make and change policy, but it's also important to help other people know this information because others can also have roles in supporting change. You never know who might be able to make a difference. So when you're creating your story, think about different audiences you might want to reach with your message. The format you choose to tell your story will depend in part on how you plan to share it, who your audience is, and also how accessible different formats are for you. The story can be written or typed on a piece of paper, in a digital document, on a social media platform, on a web page, a blog post, in a graphic, like meme-like design, or recorded in a video or audio format using your own voice, another person reading or revoicing for you, or using an electronic device. There are many options. I'm now going to turn things over to my colleague, Lauren Proby, to walk through the key policy advocacy 101 skill of finding out who your elected representatives are. Lauren.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with you all today, and thank you, Tana, for the introduction. As a description, I'm a dark-skinned African-American woman with black hair and a high bun. I'm wearing brown glasses with small gold hoops and a navy, blue, brown, and pink multicolored blouse. I'm a disability justice advocate and the new policy manager for Communication First. So one of the first steps in advocating for change is to really find out who has the power and authority to make that change. Is the policy you're looking to get changed, is it a local policy? If so, you can find out who made the policy in the first place. Is it a state law or is it a school board policy? So just understanding the source of the policy is really key because the people who created it will often be the same people who you will have to approach to change it. So, whoever made the policy in the first place is most likely the body that you want to target to change. You might also want to consider the level of government that the policy affects. So, for example, local policies often fall under the jurisdiction of your city council or school board, while state laws are created by your state legislator and federal laws are passed by Congress. So, each level of government has different responsibilities, and it's really important to understand who holds the power over your specific issue and the issue that you care about. When you're trying to identify the right people, you can also do some basic research. So a Google or just a general internet search can help you uncover who's responsible for different policies or issues, and also who represents you in government and the list of policymakers in your specific area. As an illustration, for more local policies, you can check your school board websites or election boards for up-to-date information about candidates. Merrick is going to share more about these tools with you soon. And don't be afraid to reach out directly to your local and state offices of elected officials. Remember that they represent you. In the United States, we elect representatives at the community, town, county, state, and federal levels. So depending on the issue that you're advocating for, you'll want to identify who represents you in those different areas. If you're not sure where to start, attending this webinar is a great introduction. So thank you for being here with us today. And remember, you're not alone. There are so many tools databases, and online resources to help you track down the right representatives. And here's even more good news. The more familiar you get with your elected reps, the easier it is to engage with them effectively. So now Merrick will share online resources for how to learn more about your government representatives, including resources to find out who is running for office. Merrick?
There are online tools to learn more about who represents you in government. We are making videos for our policy toolkit that will show step by step how to use some of them. I will share links in the chat for commoncause.org, ballotpedia.org, usa.gov/local-governments, and vote411.org. All these websites can help you find out who your elected representatives are. Ballotpedia also has information about other things you might be voting about.
Thanks, Merrick. Toby, I think you were going to chime in on this point as well. Are you there?
Hi, this is Toby Latham, a Filipino male in my 40s, brown skin, thick rimmed glasses, wearing a button-down blue-collar shirt with the sleeves rolled up because it's hot here in Virginia and also because I'm always ready to work. Short black hair, an attempt at growing a beard. My face by default is often expressionless, but I am excited to be here with everyone else today, sharing our experience in advocacy here in Virginia. Specifically about our recent success in getting what I believe to be the first AAC legislation on the books here in Virginia earlier this year. Um, and, and just to add, knowing who's currently representing you at whatever level is really important, but also important in our view is knowing who's in the pipeline, right? Who's gonna be next. And finding out who's next at the national level or the state level can be difficult, but at the local level, like the school board or the state delegate, state senate, I recommend, if you can tolerate it, joining your local party and getting involved at that level. One of the sponsors of our AAC bill this year was someone we met, Lindsay and I met 6 or 7 years ago at a volunteer appreciation event. And this was before this person was ever elected to any office, before she had ever announced that she was going to run for school board, which was her first elected position, and where we worked with her on trying to get local policy at the school district level with respect to AAC. She eventually made it to the state senate, where she was able to sponsor our AAC bill this year. But the groundwork with this elected official was, like I said, laid 6, 7 years ago before she was ever in a position at the state level to introduce AAC legislation. So it's really important to get to know who is next. If joining the local party isn't your thing, I always encourage folks to connect with local nonprofits or other organizations who host town halls, who host candidate forums when there are elections coming up. In Northern Virginia, there are several that we follow and that we can rely on for that purpose. But just getting involved to know who's up next is just as important as knowing who's there currently in office.
Toby, just when you say the word party, you mean like political party, like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or any other kind of party?
Or any other organization,
clarify.
because sometimes it's like for school board races in Northern Virginia, it's nonpartisan. So you will have parties involved, but it's not always identified. So knowing who's where and with what group is important.
Terrific. Thank you. All right, let's move on to learn about how to get more information about a policy issue and how to develop your ask or your message about, or what we sometimes, especially in the DC area, you sometimes hear are called talking points. Toby, did you want to get us started on explaining that skill? And Toby sort of hinted at it, but I just wanted to note that Toby has really been a truly incredible advocate for changing policy in this state of Virginia, especially with regard to how public schools implement AAC for students. It took 2 attempts over 2 different legislative sessions, but just this past year, he was able to get a bill passed that requires school districts in Virginia to ensure that all staff that interact with an AAC user to be trained before school starts in supporting their particular form of AAC. Toby.
Yeah, thanks for that background info, Tana. So yeah, our view with respect to talking points is there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of organizations, some of which have already been mentioned, that have talking points available, and you could just use those and attribute them to the organization as appropriate. We didn't have that benefit when we were advocating for the AAC bill, and we made mistakes early on. We came with all of the scientific research explaining why they should support um, ensuring that training is provided to teachers and staff in a timely manner. And looking back on it, that was probably overwhelming, and it was more effective just to tell our story. As Tana mentioned, I have an 11-year-old who uses AAC, and just telling the story about him walking into classrooms with teachers who were excited to learn about his system with them, and how backwards that was just as effective as getting behind the neuroscience of early communication development and brain development. Um, so, so we had to develop our own talking points, and we had to make it easier for folks to digest. One of the things that we also had to emphasize early on was the scope of the issue. People will like to label themselves as disability rights allies or advocates, and what we had to emphasize, especially because we started at the school board level trying to get local policy, and that hit roadblocks, so we went to the state level with it. Um, but we had to emphasize that of the disability community, there's communication related disabilities, and then there are AAC users within that smaller subset. And we had to explain that if we're waiting for this to be the biggest and loudest group in the room, then the problems are never going to get fixed. And that, I think, hit home for some of the elected officials we were speaking with. We also emphasized to folks that when you get talking points, to the extent possible, if you have time and resources, to adapt it and make sure your story fits into it and you tell your story with it. I used to work for the federal government, and I worked on regulatory policy changes, and the form talking points are important to show that there is support for it in mass and large groups supporting the change. But the unfortunate reality is that those forms, if they're not adapted or modified at all, they just get put in a stack. We've got 100 of these forms, 1,000 of these forms, and you have this stack that might not never get the scope of the issue before the decision maker. So to the extent that you can adapt it and tell your story in those talking points, it's critical that you do so. I don't doubt that there are some people um, who voted in favor of our AAC bill who have no idea what the actual fix is or the issue. But since we told our story and they connected with Calvin's story, or they might have known someone who has a similar story to Calvin's, they supported it because they um, knew that we had put in the work to identify the issue, and that they trusted us that we put also thought into the fix. So they understood our story, and they just wanted to help, literally through legislation, write the next chapter for AAC users in our school system.
And I know that Calvin, you've made sure that for Calvin to be physically present for so much of that advocacy that you've done on that issue, both at the local level and at the state level. Bob is going to explain later about how important it is just to show up and be present and be visible. But I'm personally always a huge advocate for that as well. And Angelica, did you want to touch on that as well?
Yes, for audio description, I am a Afro-Latina with black streak here, and I am wearing a Communication First shirt against a green background. I agree with Toby's point, especially relying on organizations who are doing good work and aligning with your policy topics. For example, during the month of February, the National Disability Rights Network did a advocacy letter campaign because Medicaid is in danger of being defunded. I participate in their campaign because I believe in our cause, and my congressman wrote back to me at Labor Day to reconfirm his commitment to helping our community. We have more power than you realize, and the congressional office do listens if the values are big enough. And believe me, because at one point I was a congressional intern. Overall, this is a great way to find grassroots organization that doing the good work and running these type of campaigns. Everybody can be a part of silver action engagement, even in times that you're busy.
Yes, and there is always strength in numbers. And before you begin, it's important to do some research online and to ask around about what other organizations or individuals have been working on the issue you're interested in. There's no need usually to start from scratch. Join with those people and organizations that have done work on this area already, support their efforts, and ask them to support your efforts. So now we're going to turn to some of the different ways to contact your elected representatives to share your advocacy story and to ask them to take some kind of action. I'm going to turn it back to Lauren for this section. Lauren.
Thank you, Tana. So, advocating for change is not always about attending meetings in person. There are a lot of different non-meeting ways to contact an elected representative and to also share your advocacy story and urge them to take action. As our toolkit mentions, our friends at the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network created a fact sheet that explains how you can call your representatives. It includes several helpful scripts that you can use to prepare your statements when you call, including a script for AAC users. While scripts are helpful, you can also adapt the script to reflect your personal story and why the issue matters to you. Sharing your unique perspective can help make your advocacy more compelling. There is also a proxy caller service. Here, you can write or adapt a script for what you want to tell your representative, and someone else will read it for you. Now, soon we will hear from Dean Strauss at ASAN live in a bit, but first, we're going to share a short video to demonstrate ASAN's proxy calling service.
The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network's proxy caller system is a volunteer-based project that lets U.S. constituents who can't call their political representatives due to a disability request that a volunteer call on their behalf on issues and positions designated in ASAN's regular action alerts. To use the proxy caller project, you'll use the form at proxycaller.org. First, a constituent fills out our form. You'll write your email, your name, your city, your state or territory, and your zip code. Then, you'll select the congresspeople you want to contact. It's important to make sure you pick the right congressperson and only the ones who represent you. Your call will be rejected otherwise. You should submit a separate call for each member of Congress you want to contact. Now you can write out what you'd like to be read. We recommend adapting a script from ASAN's Action Alert. You can find the current action alert here, then find the script you want to fill in. You can write your own script if you prefer, but it must be on the same issue as the action alert. Not including what you want read or submitting a call for a different issue will cause your call to be rejected. You can also write any questions that you'd like the volunteer to ask. Constituents also have the option to choose whether you'd like a volunteer to leave a voicemail if no one is in the office, and whether you'd like a confirmation email. After you submit your form, the call goes to a database. A volunteer logs into our system and can see the information the constituent entered. The volunteer makes the call. They start by saying they're calling on behalf of a constituent. They'll read the script, and at the end, they'll ask any questions the constituent would like asked and record the answers. The volunteer will write down the answer to any questions and mark the call as made in our system. The constituent will get an email saying the call was made. They'll also receive any other information, such as the staffer's response or the answers to any questions.
You can also submit a request or learn how to become a volunteer at proxycaller.org. Earlier, we reviewed how to find out who your elected representatives are. You can email them to invite your elected officials to everything and anything related to your cause. They might not be able to make it to your large rally, but they may have time to come to your book reading, which we did to kick off the AAC bill effort. And the elected folks who show up to that event told other elected officials about what they learned, which is just as important in your efforts. Sometimes elected officials may miss your email and you may have to resend it. Sending a reminder closer to the event is also very helpful. When reaching out to an elected representative, be sure to let them know if you are their constituent. That way, they will know they have a direct responsibility to represent your interests as a member of the community. As a pro tip, after a policy has been enacted, you can track whether it's being enforced to make sure that your advocacy is being sustained. Sometimes policies that are put into place are not fully implemented or enforced, and you may need to follow up with elected officials, government agencies, or oversight bodies to make sure the change you fought for is actually happening in practice. Some ways to track whether a policy is being enforced includes checking agency websites for updates or guidance, signing up for newsletters from legislative offices or watchdog organizations that specifically track these changes, requesting updates from your elected official or their staff by reaching out to their office, or talking to people affected by the issue to see if they're experiencing real changes or benefits from that said policy. In addition to tracking changes or updates, you can also make it a regular practice to reach out to your elected officials to check on the status of ongoing policies or programs directly impacting you and your community. Regularly reminding them of the issues that matter to you ensures they stay on their radar. Later, you'll also hear about how to use social media as an organizing tool to help engage with your cause and elected officials. This will show you another way to engage in non-meeting advocacy.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jordyn Zimmerman to talk about how to arrange a meeting with a representative or a candidate for office. Jordyn, are you there? There you are. Great, thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Jordyn. It's great to be joining this important webinar. For a quick visual description, I am a young Caucasian woman, with brown hair, wearing a yellow blouse. I type to communicate on iPad. There is a blurred screen behind me. On the topic of requesting a meeting, there are many ways to do this, and it is not necessary to travel all the way to Washington, D.C. Every member of Congress has offices locally, wherever you live, and even if the member is not there in person, their staff are just as important to connect with. Plus, our advocacy should never just be limited to federal offices. What happens locally matters just as much. Most offices usually have a form you can fill out online to request a meeting, but if you have a line for direct contact, definitely use that. Any personal connection can go a very long way. Personally, I always like to, and I always recommend attending public events where elected officials are speaking or present, as those are great opportunities for an initial touch point and to ask for a business card. Then you have an actual person to follow up with. As I've built relationships with some elected officials over time, I've gotten to the point where I can text them to check in on policy issues, collaborate, or ask for a quick meeting on a Saturday. That's been especially effective on the local and state level. But even at the federal level, some of the relationships I started as a college student, on spring break advocacy trips, summer training programs, and as a summer intern through the American Association of People with Disabilities, those initial requests for meetings, those initial touch points, have all stuck. While chiefs of staff I originally contacted to schedule meetings have certainly changed jobs in the past 5 years, or moved to other offices, we've still stayed in touch. People you stay in touch with can also assist if you're ever seeking contact with new staff. So I know that first outreach can feel intimidating, but it really does matter. And the follow-up matters just as much. So if you don't get a response right away, follow up and make it clear that you are a constituent, your voice matters, and be sure to note the issues you want to discuss.
Thanks, Jordyn. Turning now to Samuel, you are very well known for the ways you have advocated over the years by approaching presidential candidates during the primary season. Please tell us about how you do this.
Hi everyone. My name is Samuel Habib. I am a white 25-year-old man with brown hair and beard. My pronouns are he and him, and I live in Concord, New Hampshire. It's awesome to be here with you. Living in New Hampshire, we get to see the presidential candidates up close every few years, because the New Hampshire primary has been the first primary in the country for many years. The first time I remember going to a campaign was at a house party in my hometown of Concord for Barack Obama in 2007. I was 7 years old and I was pretty bored during his speech, but then I got to meet him. Jumping ahead 13 years, when I was 20, I was a lot more interested in the candidates and their speeches and policy positions during the 2020 presidential primary. I did research with my dad on the candidates' positions. We also got GoPro cameras that I could mount to the pole that holds my communication device, one camera facing out and one camera facing towards me. We went to as many candidate events as we could, and we had a goal of asking each candidate at least one question about disability issues. Thankfully, there was usually room set aside near the candidates for wheelchair seating. Either during the formal part of the event or after it was over, I asked the candidates about their position on issues like inclusive education, affordable and accessible housing, and employment, and social security. I had a quick introduction about myself and the question ready to go on my device. We recorded my question and their answers, and put the videos up on my YouTube channel. Some of the interactions showed that the candidates showed me respect and had thoughtful answers. Here are two of my favorites, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar.
Sam's got a question for you.
Okay.
Hi, Senator Klobuchar, nice to meet you. My name is Samuel Habib. I'm a college student and I live in Concord. I hope to move into my own apartment soon. How will you support more affordable housing for people with disabilities?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you. So, I have a big disability plan that involves fully funding IDEA, which is really important for schools. And then when it comes to housing, I have one of the biggest plans out there because I think for people with disabilities, you should be able to live with dignity. We need to expand on the ABLE Act, which allows your parents to be saving money for you and do it even in a bigger way. Because I can just tell that you are one good citizen that we want to have as productive as possible, and that means you deserve housing and the opportunity to work. So thank you.
Here's one that was not so great, with Joe Biden.
I'm gonna play the Buttigieg one first, if that's still good. Let me just share that one. Get that started. Here we go.
I just saw a bunch of people through, so.
Good luck. We're rooting for you. Yeah, we are too.
Samuel, great seeing you.
Hi, Mayor Pete. Nice to meet you.
Same here, good seeing you.
My name is Samuel Habib and I live in Concord. I am a college student and I want to live in my own apartment. How will you support more affordable housing for people with disabilities?
for everything from long-term care to disability support, we got to make sure it's not all in institutions, right? So part of that's just building more affordable housing, period. And then part of it's making sure that the way we have SSDI and these other things working actually supports home-based care, and making sure we have more workers to help make that a reality. So, big part of the plan, and I'll be thinking of you when we roll it out further as we go. Should we turn around for a picture, or what's the best? Sure. All right, here, let me swivel around to the side. Thank you very much. All right, Sam, looking good. That's nice. Excellent. No more smile, Sam. Got it. Thank you so much. All right.
Now the Biden one.
Excuse me, make room. You're coming through. Thank you. It's going to get in position anyway. Thank you. Thanks. Mr. Vice President, my son Samuel just wanted to ask you a quick question. How are you, bud?
Hi, Vice President Biden. I am a college student and I attended regular classes all the way through high school. How will you support more inclusive education for students with disabilities?
Two things. We have a thing called the Americans with Disabilities Act. We don't fund it. It will be fully funded in my administration. And you should be integrated into all of the classes because you're smart. You're smart, you're smart. The disability does not define who you are. It doesn't define who you are. Oh, God love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So proud of you. Presumptuous of me to be proud of you, but I am.
All right.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Come here, let me have that camera. You get in here. Are you Dad? We'll get one of all of us.
All right, sounds good.
You ready?
Yep.
The good news is that this interaction went viral and educated a lot of people about ableism. Forbes magazine even wrote a story about it, and we used the video in our two recent films, My Disability Roadmap and The Ride Ahead. My biggest takeaways would be 1. Do your research about the issues. 2. Prepare your device in advance. Ask your number 1 most important question, and keep the question short. 3. Get to the events early to have a good position. 4. Videotape it all and get it out on social media. Keep the videos short, maybe a minute or 2. Make sure they fairly and accurately represent what occurred. Definitely have a YouTube channel set up where you can post them. But also post them on other social media like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's better to upload them right to the platforms rather than a YouTube link. They'll get more views that way. And of course, make sure they are open captioned.
Samuel, that clip always gets me, the one with Biden. I would be remiss in not pointing out that Samuel, you were wearing a vintage, one of the original Communication First t-shirts during that Biden clip. So, Toby, are you up next?
Yeah, I'm gonna take an opportunity to echo something Jordyn mentioned and communicating with not necessarily face to face with the local elected officials, but if you do this enough, you get to a point where they trust you and you can send them text messages directly on issues. But there's also this cool point where we've gotten to where we don't show up to school board meetings as often, Lindsay and I, because or local talking events or where we can speak to policy because the policymakers text us when things are in the pipeline and say, hey, we got this thing that someone's going to try to push through. What are your thoughts on it? So showing up is important early on so that you can build those relationships and people will reach out proactively. But with these face-to-face opportunities, again, going back to the pipeline of, well, who's next? I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact that elected officials like themselves and they like to hear people talk about themselves. So even better if the thing that you're going to talk about is something that you like yourself. So I recently went to a candidate event where I took, there are 2 candidates for statewide office who happened to be from my hometown in Southeast Virginia. And so I wore a baseball jersey from the local AAA ball team. It has nothing to do with policy or policy making, but I knew that it would catch their eye and draw their attention. And sure enough, one of them came up and started talking about baseball. And then On top of that, I usually do a little bit of scanning through social media so that I have non-policy related things to talk about, and look through the last 48 or 72 hours of whatever they've posted online. And one of the candidates happened to post that they helped a stranger change a tire. So we talked about baseball and then helping strangers, and then I like to think that that got me a little bit of extra time with that elected official, and it prevented them from just going into stump speech mode where you hear these talking points and like, if you elect me, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and that's the same thing that they're saying to everybody else. So you should think about um, these opportunities for authentic or organic, conversations with because at the end of the day, they're real people. So anything you could do to get more face time with them, I recommend doing that as well. In addition to all the prep work that Samuel and Jordyn talked about.
Oh, before we move on to the next topic, I wanted to share something with some of the students in the audience. Internships and fellowship are a great way to find opportunity to speak with representative and build your advocacy skills. Disability belongs come to mind if you're looking to work in disability rights and potentially work with congressional offices and agency.
Excellent point, Angelica. And you previously mentioned AAPD, and I know that both Lauren and Jordyn also did internships and fellowships there and with the National Disability Rights Network. So now we're going to move on to the next topic and touch about how to make your points in a face-to-face encounter with a candidate or an elected representative beyond what's already been covered. So Samuel, I think we're going back to you.
I have voted in every federal and state election, and most local elections, since I turned 18. I like to research the candidates and get to know how they stand on the issues, especially disability issues, but also gun control, healthcare, and the environment. This past election, I co-hosted house parties with my parents during the Democratic primary for the 2 congressional candidates in our district, focusing on disability issues. I asked them questions about Medicaid funding and home and community-based services. It helped me decide how to vote, and the person I voted for won and now represents us in Congress.
This is Jordyn again. Whenever you have a face-to-face opportunity, whether it's a formally planned meeting or a more casual conversation in passing, it's important to go in, knowing what you aim to achieve. Are you advocating for Medicaid or another issue impacting our community? Do you want the person to vote for or against a bill? Do you want them to introduce or co-sponsor legislation? Do you want them to think differently about an issue? Whatever your goal is, you need to have a clear understanding of that. It's also important to know what your compromises and non-negotiables are, as an AAC user or as an ally. For me, I like to attend events where my elected officials are. During those casual events, whether canvassing in my community or a celebration at the White House, I'm the person running around and finagling my way to everyone, often taking pictures and trying to show quick, pre-typed messages on my iPad. Because time is limited in those moments, pre-typed messages work best for me. I have so much fun at these events, and I equally enjoy the follow-up. When these meetings are more formally planned, I'll compromise and meet my elected officials wherever it's most effective. I know people are busy, so sometimes that's a coffee shop, on a video platform, or in their office. One thing that is a non-negotiable for me though, during more formally planned meetings, is typing in real time. It helps my elected officials get to know me, how I communicate, what I need, and how they can show up as a representative for their full constituency. It's led to conversations about actual policy for AAC users, which I'm excited to share about sometime in the future. I want to know that the person I've voted for, or the person appointed, is an ally to my basic needs and rights, including the right to communicate, to be heard, and to be understood. I've had elected officials watch sports on their phone as I'm typing, or grab my iPad away, as a joke. These types of interactions, including by those elected officials that call themselves allies, have really informed my approach to face-to-face meetings, and that piece of the interaction being a non-negotiable for my advocacy. It's important to remember that our vote is our voice, and face-to-face meetings are a way to extend that, framing policies in our real human stories, beyond the voting booth, and can also help inform your voting choices for the future.
Just want to say that having personally seen Jordyn in action at various events in DC, she has no fear. At a White House event we were both at a couple of years ago, she sat as close as possible to the front, and I think she managed to take selfies with nearly every cabinet member, senator, and representative that was there, as well as the president and the vice president. She had no fear, no shame, just went right up to everyone. I am in awe, Jordyn. All right, Toby, you've also been really good at showing up to public meetings and hearings and giving 2 to 3 minute public comments. And I know there's a question in the Q&A that was posed by someone about accommodations that might be requested for someone who's using AAC to do that. So I don't know if you want to touch on that as well, but I personally think showing up to public meetings and making comments are really powerful opportunities to reach not just those policymakers, but also those in the audience. And that can be especially effective at the local level. And if you're able to be there in person as well, because a lot happens usually after you make the comment, people will come up to you and you can meet folks and continue spreading the information. So Toby.
And now that's going to get into one of the points I was going to make about practicing your remarks so that you don't get emotional at the microphone, and what Tana just said about speaking not only to the elected officials, but also to the people in the audience is made me think about the first time Lindsay and I went to a school board meeting, and and I'm going to get off script here a little bit. The tradition in our school board meetings is that if you support what the speaker is talking about, you stand in solidarity. And Lindsay and I went there as AAC, the parents of an AAC user, and people started standing, and we were like, who are these people? And then we later found out, they're part of a pride group and other the teachers unions and all these organizations that we didn't think to partner up with prior to, but just telling our story got a whole new group of allies on the AAC advocacy front. But as far as school board, local, advocacy efforts, state level advocacy efforts in Virginia, you have these opportunities to go make public comment in support of policy changes or legislation that's been proposed. And you don't get a whole lot of time. It ranges anywhere between 1 minute to 3 minutes. And sometimes you have to be willing and able to adjust. We've shown up to opportunities where we've been told to prepare 2 minutes remarks, and then the crowd is so large that they say, hey, you're going to get 30 seconds to talk to your point. So I always recommend having your prepared remarks and then also having a backup plan in case they change the format as far as the time is concerned. And when you get any size group, the unfortunate reality is if you're not first and you're not last, then you're stuck in the middle somewhere. So if you're in the middle, you have to think about what you're going to say to make sure that what you say is memorable to the crowd, because it can get buried in the remarks, and it's not an easy task even for the most experienced advocate, especially from a parent's perspective. I could talk about my own problems all day long, but when I'm advocating for my son, there's this balance that has to occur. I have to respect his privacy, and I have to tell an effective story, so have enough detail to where I can tell an effective story yet respect his privacy, all at the same time trying not to get overwhelmed as a parent with my emotions. The frustration of even having to show up to ask for someone to have the support that they deserve can be overwhelming. So by the time I get to a podium, I've already practiced my remarks, not even exaggerating 30 something times just to get the cries out, and also to adjust to make sure I'm under the time limit. Um, you know, there are others who can get to a podium with nothing planned, and they're effective. My wife's one of them. You know, I have love-hate relationships with those folks, but they exist. Um, but just learn what works for you. Give it a couple dry runs at home with trusted friends or in front of a mirror. Um, you also have to understand the crowd that you're speaking to sometimes. What we've learned is that you don't have to, persuade the entire panel that's in front of you. You just have to get a majority sometimes to get a piece of legislation out of a committee and onto the bigger or subcommittee and onto a bigger committee, or pass at a school board level. So you might have to go hard on a particular point that might lose one of the people at the panel, but gain two others. And focusing your remarks on the goal, whether it's a majority um, or the entire crowd, is important as well. Um, and the last point is just when you're doing face-to-face advocacy, not at a podium, but just with elected officials in general, is making sure you listen to the responses you get. We learned early on that some things sound good, but it's not the answer you're looking for. And if you're looking for a commitment on a vote on a particular piece of legislation, you might get some really good sound bites that make you feel good, but when you walk away from the conversation, you realize later that you didn't get a commitment. You got a conditional, yeah, we'll do this thing that you're asking us to do if all of these other things fall into place. So that takes training and experience, and that's where linking up with established organizations or someone who's done the advocacy piece before is helpful. Otherwise, you could just fail a bunch of times like I did early on. But that listening piece is critical.
Toby, just in the interest of time, I'm going to propose that we play a short clip from your recent appearance on the U.S. Capitol steps that brought your family some more national attention. Maybe when that's done, you can just briefly say how that came about and everything. But I want to make sure we have enough time for every other piece here. So let me just share my screen.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. I'm Lindsay Latham. This is Calvin and Lucy.
I'm their dad.
Our journey has started about 10 years ago. He was diagnosed with a rare brain malformation called polymicrogyria. So he is eligible for Medicaid based on his disability. He requires a lot of assistance, day-to-day assistance. Calvin has 3 insurances. His 3rd insurance is Medicaid. Our family would be bankrupt if we lost Medicaid.
Some of the things that Medicaid paid for just to get here this morning, car seat that he has especially made for him, went through both private insurance companies, which denied it because it wasn't medically necessary. Do you know who picked it up? Medicaid. And then that chair that he uses as a mobility aid for when he's fatigued, not medically necessary by his private insurance companies. You know who picked it up? Medicaid. His talker, 2 private insurance companies, said it's not medically necessary for our kid who can't communicate without it. You know who picked it up? Medicaid.
A lot of us feel distressed and scared and angry. We're here now because we are facing this existential crisis, and this brings hope.
So there you got to see Lindsay, who's the more exciting half of the leadership in our household. But that opportunity, a 72-hour period from, hey, can you show up at the Capitol, to giving our, short interview with, if you didn't notice or recognize those folks, it's Senator Booker, Cory Booker, and then on the other side was Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. But as short as that period was, it was years of groundwork. Every time we go out and advocate, we ensure folks know that, hey, we're up for the next opportunity. We're just outside of the Capitol. We can be there in short notice, and we give people the opportunity to present those. And we tell them, don't assume that because we have young children, we're not going to be able to show up. Ask us, and if we can't, we'll tell you as much. But that opportunity came through some of the nonprofit organizations that we've worked with in the past. I think it was Senator Booker's office reached out to his network, and they eventually got to us, and they asked us to come out and speak about our experience. And I think it's racked up like something like 350,000 views on Instagram and on other platforms. But again, we had to make this decision about whether we bring the whole family or is it just Lindsay, is it just me, and the format worked for all of us. So it was
It was amazing. And I know the audio was low on that. So we'll include a link to that in the links that we send out after the webinar as well. I also want to point out that in that video, Calvin was wearing a Communication First t-shirt. I think it was actually the one that Jordyn's quote, right?
Yep.
So anyway, he's very good about that. And I want to point out that wearing a t-shirt or carrying a sign, if that's allowed, both of those can be very powerful if that's all you can do or want to do. Just showing up, if elected officials see you, they're more likely to remember you and think of you when they're making decisions about key policy issues that might impact you. All right, so we are going to move on to social media, and I think we're going to try to keep this one a little short. And so let's, Angelica, did you want to kick us off here?
Sure.
Yeah.
And social media is such a powerful platform for making your voice heard, especially for young adults. It's essential to humanize the statistic we often encounter by highlighting how real lives and personal experience are affected. When I was a collegiate law fellow, great fellowship program, by the way, for students with disability who was interested to pursue law school. During my time, I wrote about how the overturning of Roe versus Wade impacts the disability community on their blog site, from barriers to access and birth control for symptoms management to broader reproductive healthcare challenges, drawing on my own lived experience as example. My story gets shared on various platforms such on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. The White House took notice of my work and invited me to the White House to find ways to protect reproductive care for disabled Americans. By sharing my story online, I was able to make a difference. So from building a blog site or contributing to assisting sites that's maybe on your school website or your university programs, I was able or just leveraging platforms like YouTube and TikTok to educate audience on an important issue. Social media offer countless ways to be a force for good.
Thank you, Angelica. Dean, are you prepared to jump in? Oh, great. To talk a little bit about some of the downsides of social media and misinformation and disinformation. Does that work?
Definitely.
Thank you.
For a quick visual description, I am a white person with short curly brown hair and yellow glasses. Social media is a super great tool, but we need to be prepared to combat misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is untrue or misleading info that people spread on purpose to trick other people. People use disinformation to control what other people think and do, usually to hurt a person or a group of people. And that's different from misinformation, which is untrue information people share on accident. So there are 5 rules for debunking. Focus on what is true instead of the lie. Don't just debunk, but explain the truth. Warn people about the fake fact spreaders. Talk about unlikely supporters, and make your points short and easy to understand. So in practice, you could say something like vaccines are safe and effective instead of vaccines don't cause autism. Both of those things are true, but the second one will make people remember the opposite of what you want them to remember.
Dean, I was just backing up to share, to thank you for your input on the disinformation and misinformation, and to point out that you are the person in charge of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network's calling system, which is a really important way for folks who may have difficulty or cannot access telephone calls to when they are trying to call representatives. We will be sure to include links to all those resources, which are super important, in the follow-up email after the webinar. So Jordyn, you had one thing to say about social media, and then Lauren will add one thing, and then we're going to turn over to Bob.
This is Jordyn again. I found that social media is a great tool, both for us as AAC users and allies, who can help with amplifying our messages. For AAC users, it provides us with another way to interact with offices or elected officials, especially if face-to-face meetings just aren't your thing. In fact, a few years ago, I was facing a situation and took to social media, framing my story at the time, within the broader policy issue. I tagged the local offices and shared publicly. It ended up gaining a lot of traction among the community, and it really helped to hold a group of people accountable, as well as change policy on a local level. Similarly, when the Supreme Court did not allow me to take iPad into the courtroom, I took to social media and elicited traction for the issue of no electronics. I have also used social media to highlight meetings that I have had, to thank people publicly, and to elicit more general support around key issues. I've found that it is really effective when posts are rooted in some personal narrative or story, so that people can understand the human side of a policy. At the same time, social media is also a place to learn, listen, and understand others' perspectives to make your advocacy even stronger.
Thank you, Jordyn, Dean, and Angelica. So finally, social media is also very helpful in building and maintaining advocacy community through shared experience. You can use social media to learn from advocates' strengths and victories, join online conversations, or use niche Facebook groups and other online communities to meet people who can support your advocacy. Using digital hashtags relevant to your advocacy topic can also help your post to be discovered by a much wider audience. Social media is a great tool for holding public officials accountable. So, for example, tagging a representative in a post or sharing a personal story related to the policy can really help to make it visible to both the representatives as well as their followers. And this type of visibility will really help to create public pressure and continue action for change.
For this final section, we're going to turn it over to Bob to highlight a sometimes underestimated or discounted tool that can be extremely powerful. Bob, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Hi, I am Bob Williams, a 68-year-old guy. I have lived and worked in DC nearly 50 years. Since going to college, Tana said I organized my first sit-in when I was in high school. It actually was when I was in elementary school. It is never too early or late to exercise our rights, because when we do not exercise our rights, what happens? We lose them. Before I give my planned remarks, I want to underscore what others have said. Hanging out at events that policymakers and decision makers attend really itself challenges how they view and respond to us. Also, as a high school student and in college, I interned with local, state, and congressional offices. Because I asked. It is great to be with you all this afternoon. I am very glad that I have been asked to talk about how and why showing up is both the first and what I believe is the most critical action all of us must repeatedly take to effectively advocate for ourselves, others we know, and to bring about the type of policies and changes we want to help bring about. Creating change that is larger than one person never takes place based on the actions of one person. It takes the combined actions of many people working together and playing different roles to bring it about. Showing up, for me, has always been about making it clear to myself and others that I care deeply about a concern and want others to know it. There are numerous ways that one can, quote, show up, close quote. I want to tell you about some of them I have used. In 1972, the summer before high school, I was at a camp on the ocean for disabled kids and adults in Connecticut. We were all picnicking by the beach when the governor showed up, along with a gaggle of television and newspaper reporters. When he arrived, we rushed him. I think I was one of the first to get to him, and I plopped my alphabet and word board into his hands, and began to spell out what I wanted him to know, and he repeated it letter by letter, word by word, while the TV news cameras were rolling, and reporters writing down everything I spelled out. I lit into him about the cuts he wanted to make. And to his credit as well as my astonishment, he heard and revoiced everything of what I said. Did it make a difference in his decision making? I do not know. I do know it made a big difference to those of us who spoke to him and pushed him for better education, better services, greater opportunities. Because after that day, we began to talk and work together. We discussed the barriers, bias, and discrimination we faced, and even more the actions that we believed must be taken to eliminate them. We started showing up at the state legislature, at first just to be seen, and for legislators to see how inaccessible the Capitol was. Pretty soon some legislators, their staff, reporters, and even the Connecticut Secretary of State started to ask us questions. Why were we there? What did we want? What changes in laws were needed? How could buildings, buses, and voting places be made accessible? What did we think about children with and without disabilities being educated together? What did we think of institutions? They asked some of these questions, and we prompted them to ask us, others. This is when real discussions began to take place about how to make some of the needed changes. Advocacy always begins by showing up, opening some doors, and creating ways of having others show up. These are some additional ways of showing up without saying or typing a word, in order to express your views and make an impact. Attend congressional, state legislature, city council, or board of education hearings. Stand in a long line to get into a meeting or hearing that you know you might not get into it. Why would you do this? To show how you and many others in that long line deeply care about and are affected by a particular policy or concern. Why do it? Because there is unity and strength in numbers. Sign up to vote. And be proud and highly visible about it. Register and vote in person. Take and post selfies of yourself doing both on social media. Let Communication First and others know so we can post them. Attend rallies and other events on issues you are passionate about which might or might not be related to disability. Why? Because it is your and all of our constitutional right. Why exercise that right? Or do any of the other things I have touched on? Freedom of expression is not free. We must demand it. Because when we show up and begin to advocate for what we know to be necessary and right, we reveal, in ways I believe words can never fully do, who we know we truly are. Not who many people see us and treat us as being. Showing up and advocating will not change how everyone sees us, nor bring about everything we seek. But it is life-saving. Now more than ever in my life and career, our civil rights and liberties are being attacked. The services and supports many of us need to live are being cut and eliminated. Public officials openly mock and question our humanity. So, now more than ever, we must show up, be seen, be proud, be counted, and be heard. We must show up and advocate. We must do all we individually and collectively can. As if our lives and those of our parents, brothers and sisters, and sons and daughters depend on it. Because they do.
Thank you, Bob. We are unfortunately out of time. There are some incredibly good questions in the Q&A box, including one about balancing privacy and advocacy that I think are important for us to cover, but we'll probably do that as we post the resources. Actually, we'll probably add it to the toolkit along with the videos that we're planning to create to help walk folks through a lot of the techniques. I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their amazing experiences and tips today. I learned things today. I hope others did as well. We also want to have big thanks to our communication and language access providers, Captioner Cheryl, and our ASL interpreters, Kent and Audrey. And before we close, I just want to remind folks that we're going to encourage everyone who attended today to do one or two things. First, please send an email to at least one of your elected representatives, whether that's someone who represents you at the local, state, or federal level. Tell your personal story about something that's impacting or could impact you or an AAC user you know, and ask them to do something about it. You could ask them to support some kind of change in general that you'd like to see, or ask them to vote for or against something that's currently specifically on their plate. Or you could tell them about something else that's important to you. And second, if you are on social media, consider posting a message about an issue that is important to you, tagging a representative, and also tagging us, as Bob suggested, if you like. So thanks everyone once again for attending and for your support of our mission. If other panelists want to turn on their videos like Bob and Samuel, just so we can see everyone in one place, that would say farewell to everyone. I think that would be nice. So thanks.
Thank you for having me on the webinar. Hope to see you all again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.